government has committed to appointing a national maternity commissioner after a review released this morning has found that families are being failed and babies unnecessarily dying. Baroness Amos was brought in to carry out an investigation of maternity services after a series of scandals around the country. The commissioner is one of 8 recommendations made in the report. Another is that doctors should be forced to work night shifts and over weekends, so there's a senior consultant on shift 24/7. Joining us now is the Health Secretary, James Murray. James, morning to you.
Hi, good morning.
We've talked about this quite a lot in this programme, the maternity scandals, because there's so many of them and they've gone over on such a long period of time. When you look at this, James, can you come up with a definitive why? Why in a modern country, an allegedly civilised country, can we not offer a basic uniform standard of care and decency to mums and dads for that crucial moment in their lives? Why do we have such a problem?
Yeah, it's a really important question. And I think, for far too long, women, babies and their families have been failed by NHS maternity and neonatal services. And I think you asked the question why, and I don't think there's a single reason why, but I think there is a deep, profound reason which relates to culture in maternity services. I can point to other findings of Baroness Amos's report and Donna Ockendon's report into what happened in Nottingham that was published last week about staffing levels, training, all sorts of different aspects of services. But I think there is a cultural thing. I think there is something about the culture where there is a culture of cover-up at the top when things go wrong. There's too often a culture of bullying. There are toxic dynamics in maternity services, and I think that culture has to change.
There's a culture of unkindness potentially as well. We talked about that a lot last week, where it's kind of unkindness to women in this very often.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's also about women not being listened to. There's a really strong sense from some of the families I met in Nottingham a couple of weeks ago, some of the families who were affected by the failings in Nottingham, and speaking to them about what had happened, there were so many deeply upsetting feelings they had, which are going to be with them their whole lives. But there was a really strong sense as well that women just hadn't been listened to, that they had tried to raise concerns, raise the alarm, ask for extra help and support, and just been ignored. And hadn't had their voices heard. There's
a fear, actually, that for whatever else good work Baroness Amos has done here, she might have been guilty of not listening as well. Bill Kirkup, Dr. Bill Kirkup, the guy who investigated maternity services in Morecambe Bay and East Kent, he's resigned from this inquiry because Baroness Amos found that the normal birth philosophy was not a major reason in causing avoidable harm. Many people believe that that's nonsense, that midwives are pushing that idea. You have to have a normal birth, you have to have a normal birth, you have to have a normal birth against the wishes of women. It's a good example of bullying, a good example of the toxic culture you're talking about. And Bill Kirkup thinks that's at the heart of the failings in the maternity sector. And Baroness Amos has not agreed with him and he's walked out. So whose side are you on? Who do you think's right in this?
Well, I'm on the side of women and their babies and their families. And let me say, look, Bill Kirkup has huge expertise, and I really value his contribution to the work that Baroness Amos has been leading. What I want to focus on is the substance of Baroness Amos's report.
But he's focused on the substance, James, because he's resigned and said you can't just say you believe in women. He's saying there's a fundamental problem here. There is a culture of normal birth at all costs being pushed by midwives. Baroness Amos says that's not significant. He says it is very significant. You've got to pick a side on that one, don't you, as the person who runs the NHS?
Well, I think the side that I pick is that women should never be forced into one type of birth over another. Women should make their own choice about what is right for them in the full knowledge and understanding of the risks and benefits of different types of birth, but women should never be pushed into. Do
you think that exists? Do you think, from what you read a lot of the reports, you've spoken to a lot of people, James Murray, I know this. Do you think there's been a problem there, a culture of midwives pushing normal birth as an ideology?
Well, I think there's clearly examples of that, and I think it's more wider than that, though, about women not being listened to. Because if a woman doesn't want a particular type of birth, her voice should be listened to. If a woman has concerns about the treatment she's receiving, she should be listened to. If a woman asks for extra support, she should be listened to. That is part of the problem here, and one of the reasons why we've agreed and we're announcing today to appoint a new maternity and neonatal commissioner, is to make sure that we can have that commissioner in place to hold the system to account, and to make sure that the voice of women is right at the heart of decisions being taken in government.
You've adopted that recommendation. Will you adopt all of the recommendations from this report?
So all of the recommendations from Valerie Amos's report will go into the task force that I chair, which is going to report by the end of the year with a comprehensive action plan. I'll just explain why we're doing it that way, because it's fair for people to ask, why have we set up that process? What I am very conscious of is that recommendations of reviews and investigations into maternity service failings in the past, recommendations have often been accepted on the day and then sat on a shelf and gathered dust. What I said last week in response to Donna Ockenden's report about Nottingham, and what will be the case today about Baroness Amos's report, is that all the recommendations will go into the task force that I chair, and that will report by the end of this year with a comprehensive action plan for how we're going to make.
And you'll say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. You'll be very clear which ones you're accepting, which you're rejecting.
Well, there are all the recommendations from Baroness Amos's report, but there's also, as I said, recommendations from Donna Ockenden's report and many other reports as well. And there have been dozens of reports in recent years, hundreds of recommendations. We need to make sure we have a clear action plan of what we're going to do, because I think one reflection I had when I met some of the affected families in Nottingham a couple of weeks ago is that they have been the ones driving this for so many years. They have been the ones desperate for accountability, for justice, for change. We need to make sure as a government that we are leading that with them.
Lots of people asking the same question, actually, to get in touch via text. How many people have been fired as a result of failures like this? How many midwives have lost their jobs because of their care has resulted in serious harm?
Yeah, well, that's a decision for individual trusts and for the regulators.
Do you know the answer? Do you happen to know the answer? How many midwives have been fired?
I haven't got a statistic I can share with you, but I think that.
But should you know that, James? Because actually, this accountability is a massive question here. We've seen this disgrace, this national disgrace across multiple trusts. Should you not know, as the health secretary, how many people have lost their jobs as a result of this?
Well, I completely agree with you that accountability is critical here, because there was someone, again, in Nottingham I met a couple of weeks ago who said to me, accountability drives action. And I think that comes down to the fundamental way in which we're going to make change happen, because if you don't have accountability, then senior leaders feel they can get away with behaving badly.
But you need to know who's been fired then, James. If that's exactly the point. I can't tell you how many people are getting in touch with this. How many of them have been fired?
Yeah, and as I said, I haven't got a stat to share with you this morning.
You shouldn't. Then accountability is meaningless, because to many people, if you do a terrible job and it leads to harm, something has to happen to you. You should be able to say, they've been fired. Or if they've not been fired, they're going to be fired.
But the accountability means that trusts, regulators, professional bodies have to do their job properly. Now, my job is to make sure they do that. I will be meeting Nottingham, the trust in Nottingham. I will be meeting the GMC. I'm working with the CQC. We need to make sure that the regulators and trusts are doing their job properly and holding people to account, because that accountability is critical to driving change in the system, and to making sure that we have that accountability and justice that families so desperately need.
Well, I would suggest as Health Secretary, it should come to a point where you know precisely who has been fired or disciplined and in what way. You've settled the doctors' strike, Jesmo. We should ask you about that before you go. Junior doctors will get an extra 6.6% this year, which amounts to a 35% increase over the last 4 years. What have you got back in this negotiation? What efficiencies or improvements are we going to see as a result of them getting this very considerable pay rise?
Well, the big change as a result of this deal being agreed is that the strikes are now over, and the BMA have made that clear. And let's be clear about the damaging cost of strikes. Strikes cost £50 million a day. The impact on strikes, even though we've managed to maintain NHS services largely during the strikes, they have a big impact on patients, and they have a much bigger impact on other NHS staff who have to step up.
But we're not getting more for our money, we're just getting no strike.
Well, I think the fact we're getting no strikes is significant, because it means that we can focus on working with resident doctors and all staff in the NHS to build an NHS which is fit for the future. And
I just want to put what the Deputy Co-Chair of the Resident Doctors Committee has said. Most doctors will look at this as a 10-month deal. He's almost certain that the next Resident Doctors Committee would ballot again on pay and pay alone. You've given him 6%. The total is 35%. They're going to strike again, aren't they, in a year's time because they want more money?
Well, look, what they've said as a result of the ballot result yesterday is that the strikes are over. We now need to focus on working with the resident doctors to implement the deal that we've agreed, to build on that relationship and to make sure we do everything we can to avoid any industrial action in the future.
So when he says he's almost certain the next Resident Doctors Committee would ballot again on pay and pay alone, what do you say to him?
Well, what I would say is that we've just had a deal which has been accepted by a majority of resident doctors who are members of the BMA. The BMA have said that means the strikes are over. This is the opportunity to build a new relationship between the government and resident doctors where we can work together in the interests of patients and the wider NHS.
James Murray, good to speak to you. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks very much.
That's James Murray, the Health Secretary.